September 2nd, 1933, two trains, hundreds of miles apart, were carrying the same horrific secret. In Bratislava, a railway worker finds a heavy brown suitcase. In Kosice, the same type of suitcase was found, but what was inside of them would test anybody's imagination. It was the dismembered body of a woman. And this is the case of Otýlie Vranská, a case so brutal that it became the most famous, the longest running unsolved murder in the entire Czechoslovak history. For 90 years, the murderer remained unknown. But a modern team of police historians refused to let the case die. After years of hard work, they finally came with an answer. They found who was the murderer. And the answer did not lay in some dusty crime scene, but rather in an overlooked document, as well as in the motive of a decorated soldier. Before diving into the gruesome details of the murder, let's try to know the victim. Her name was Otýlie Vranská, and she was born in Slovakia, in Brezno nad Hronom in 1911. Her family was very poor. Her father being a mere street sweeper, we can say her life was very hard from the very beginning. That's why she ran away from home at 11, and by 18 she already had problems with the law because of her vagrancy. That's why she decided to move to Prague in March of 1933, dreaming of a better life. But she had trouble keeping down a job, and that's why she resorted to what she thought to be her only solution in those times, though it was a dangerous one, and that would be prostitution. But Otýlie was not your classic night worker. She was different. She was not asking for money in exchange of sexual services, but rather she was asking for shelter and food, hoping to find a suitable husband. Of course, the other prostitutes would laugh at these ideas, and they were calling her a naive village girl, using the nickname Slovačka. On August the 31st, 1933, Otýlie told her landlady that she had a date with a sergeant major, a man who promised her marriage. This man was named Józef Piekny, and he was everything that Otýlie was dreaming of. He had social status, stability, and seemed to be her way out. But little did she know that this would be her last night alive. That evening, at the Coruna passageway, Otýlie was waiting for her lover. Piekny did show up, but he was not unaccompanied. He brought his new partner, another prostitute by the name Antonie Koklesova. Otýlie was, of course, disappointed, but she did not let it show. The three of them later on went to the restaurant U Kupciu. Otýlie drank a few beers, and she did mention that she was unable to sleep at her place that night as she was afraid of waking up her landlady. Yet, despite this, she refused Koklesova's invitation to sleep at her place. She was probably hoping for an invitation from her lover, one that unfortunately never came. Around 11, the three of them parted ways, while Koklesova and Piekny went back to his apartment at Karlovo na Mešti. Otýlie, desperate, moved on. She was later on seen with another man described as a young man with curly blonde hair. He bought her wine and an apple. This happened at a restaurant named U Politice Mrtvoli. The apple aspect is important because it would become a critical clue in the investigation. She was last seen at around midnight, peeking through the window of a ballroom named U Schmelhausu restaurant. But the question that remains is, where did she go from there? What would be her last steps? Otýlie's body was found on the 2nd of September 1933. One suitcase was found in Bratislava, while the other one was found in Kosice. Together, they weighed over 70 kilograms, which made the officers believe that whoever brought these suitcases onto the trains must have used some means of transportation. An unusual fact that they noticed was that inside a suitcase there were sheets with some letters embroidered onto them, letter K and letter K1. On September 6th, some gruesome pictures of the victims' bodies surfaced. They have been presented in the local newspapers, and because of this, Otýlie's sisters came forward, being able to identify her body. The case became a national sensation. Photographs of the victim's body were displayed as evidence in the police station's windows. Of course, this was considered to be a macabre public display and generated mass attention, but little usable evidence. The early autopsy suggested that death occurred due to 2 wounds inflicted to the head, considered to be inflicted with a meat cleaver. One of the wounds penetrated deep into the brain, about 6 centimeters, which was thought to have caused unconsciousness. The head was then severed by 2 strong cuts with a knife, which was made while the victim was still alive. This was thought because of the amount of blood that was inhaled. After death, the killer inflicted another 7 stab wounds onto the victim's left breast. 3 of the wounds penetrated the lungs. He then separated the legs in the groin area. He also cut them at the knees so that they could fit better in those trunks. Based on the apple remains that were found in the victim's stomach, the time of death was thought to have occurred sometime between 1 and 3 a.m. on September 1st. The dismemberment was initially described as expert, leading investigators to believe that the murderer was either a butcher or a surgeon. But this only obscured the investigation, and of course it gave leeway for other potential suspects to escape the eye of justice. Later on, the investigation seemed to focus only on the so-called street ghost, and this was an individual who sent letters to the newspapers and to the police stations confessing to the murder, as well as to other similar murders which have occurred, such as the unresolved Prague murder of the prostitute Janotova. Though he was likely a hoax, the case was still derailed. Another potential suspect was, of course, Sergeant Major Piekny, who did not report to the police station in the beginning, despite the public appeals which were made. He only showed himself at the police station after a police patrol went and brought him in. Of course, due to his status as a decorated war veteran, investigators were reserved and never searched his apartment, despite the inconsistencies in his and Koklesova's statements. Thus, the original investigation failed due to distraction and the inexperience that the police force had. Now, fast forward to 2017, where the Czech Police Museum, their team led by Radek Galaš, decided to reopen the case. They first attempted DNA analysis, as they did find a string of hair on the victim's body, but that was found to be inconclusive, considered to be just a contamination. Thus, they decided to reanalyze old documents, and what they found was completely striking. They found 2 autopsy reports. The original, which was written by Professor František Hayek, revealed a stunning fact. Otýlie Vranská did not die from head injuries. The true cause of death was bleeding from a skillful cut which was made on the neck from ear to ear, considered to be inflicted by an attacker who was standing behind the victim while pulling her head backwards. The skill needed to make such a precise cut was suited for a soldier, or rather a legionnaire, one might say. The neck cut was fatal. The subsequent wounds, the head slashes, and the shallow cuts which were made onto the chest of the victim, these were likely attempts to further confuse the investigators, or they might have been inflicted by somebody else, maybe a female accomplice. The quartering, which was the main cause of death, was considered to have required a considerable force, thus proving that the primary killer was a man. All evidence now pointed to Józef Piękny, the sergeant major, and his motive, one can say, was clear as well. He felt threatened. Piękny's relationship with a prostitute was clearly prohibited and most likely would have been the end of his prestigious military career. What is considered to have occurred is on that fateful night, after Otýlie's encounter with that stunning young blonde man, after that she went back to Piękny's apartment, desiring to speak with him and maybe sleep there as well. But of course, noticing that his new mistress was there as well, most likely a fight ensued, a fight in which Vranská threatened to reveal their relationship should he fail to keep his promise of marriage. Of course, this made Sergeant Major lash out and commit the murder. We can say that this crime was guided by impulse and fear. Based on their analysis and the reconstruction of that night, Galaš stated that he is 80% sure that Józef Piękny is the murderer. And he stated, and I quote, "It is very likely that Antonie Koklesova was present that night as an accomplice." So, after 90 years, the most famous unsolved case in the Czechoslovak history finally has a name attached to it, one that very few would have thought of. It was not a stranger, not a person from the bottom rung of society, but a respectable man which was pushed to the edge by a secret. Though Piękny and Koklesova are long gone, the truth has finally surfaced through relentless historical work. The case of Otýlie Vranská serves as a stark reminder. Sometimes justice is never served, and sometimes the people we rely on most to protect us fail at doing so. But is this case truly closed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.